Welcome back, Year 10 historians. It's time for the fight for civil rights beyond Australia's borders, Part 2. So, your learning goals for today are going to be knowing about King's non-violent attitude. We're talking about Martin Luther King there. Know about the Black Power movement, political movement in the US of African Americans. Very, very interesting. And know how the world reacted to South African racial segregation. So segregation means to separate people. South Africa had apartheid, which was an extreme version of segregation, and other countries protested that by not allowing their sports teams to come to their country. We'll talk about that a bit more later. Let's get stuck right in to the fourth learning goal, which is be able to understand different perspectives. So you're going to do an activity on that. Okay, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the importance of non-violent protest. So the Montgomery bus boycott led by charismatic Martin Luther King Jr. Yeah, so last time we talked about the Montgomery bus boycott, that was when Rosa Parks wouldn't give up her seat to a white person. She got arrested, and then African Americans in Montgomery, Alabama protested, and 381 short days later they stopped bus segregation in that state. Nice. That was led by Martin Luther King Jr., really charismatic pastor. You're going to hear an amazing speech from him in a minute. King was all about non-violent protest. Yep. And he got that from two sources. Firstly, he was trained as a Christian minister, and his training as a Christian minister said that he should support non-violence. Secondly, he was a fan of Gandhi. Gandhi is a really famous non-violent protester who achieved independence for India, managed to get them out of the British Empire, all with using no violence. Other people were violent, but he wasn't. Yeah. So this old bald dude is Gandhi. He objects to violence because when it appears to do good, the good is only temporary. The evil it does is permanent. Yeah. And this is Martin Luther King here, giving a speech. He's an amazing speech giver. He was unfortunately assassinated by a racist. Anyway, here's a really cool thing. If you ever go to Washington, D.C., there's this giant statue to Martin Luther King. Now, what is that saying about Martin Luther King's personality? Solid. Okay, back into it. The Black Power movement. Let's talk about that. Black activist Stokely Carmichael urged African Americans to build the black community and fight against racism. In 1966, the Black Panther Party was set up. A bunch of very well-dressed individuals. And a quote when they set that up was, "We want freedom. We want the power to determine the destiny of our black and oppressed communities." Here's a sweet-ass Black Power logo. Here are some of the dudes from the Black Panther Party. Check them out with their sweet-ass black berets. However, they do have guns. They were not... Martin Luther King was non-violent. The Black Panther Party did advocate violence. Their argument was, well, we've been violently oppressed, first as slaves and now as second-class citizens for centuries. Might need a little bit of violence to rewrite the balance there. Here's some Black Panther protesters protesting outside a court building. Okay, the South African Springboks tour down under. So South Africa, as we mentioned, had a policy of apartheid, which means apartness, from 1948 until the early 1990s. It was extreme segregation of blacks and whites. You know, they didn't really use the same toilets, had to sit in different parts of the park bench. It was madness. Other countries boycotted playing sports against South Africa in protest. So they were hoping, yeah, maybe if we boycott playing sports against South Africa, who's quite a sport mad nation, it might in some small way help to break up their apartheid policy. But in 1971, their rugby team called the Springboks toured Australia, and it led to heaps of anti-racist protests. So we're going to have a look at some of the images from that now. So here's an example of apartheid in South Africa. Yeah. This black African dude's not even allowed to sit on that chair, he's just got to stand, but he's rebelling and sitting on the edge of it. Blankes means whites in Afrikaans. And that's a pretty harsh sign. Beware of natives. It's about as racist as it gets. And check this out. This is a sign on a beach. White area. This is a poster advertising a protest for when the 1971 Springbok tour came to Australia. And here's some of the Australian protesters. Pretty cool cars back in 1971. Okay, people, your activity. I want you to imagine that you're from one of these four perspectives. I want you to write 1 or 2 sentences summing up what the different perspectives of people might have been when the Springboks toured Australia in 1971. Yeah. So draw up a grid like that. Give me a couple of sentences on how each of those 4 groups might have felt. A black South African, an Australian rugby fan, a Springbok rugby player, and the South African government. They all have very different perspectives on this rugby tour, and I want you to enlighten me. Okay, we're going to watch this video. This is one of the most amazing political speeches ever given. Martin Luther King in 1963, I Have a Dream speech. You've probably heard some of the lines from it before. Anyway, the guy's a legend.
I have the pleasure to present to you Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. Five score years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will they be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream. My 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day, down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification. One day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted. And every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day when all of God's children be able to sing with new meaning, my country, tears of thee. Sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. And so let freedom ring. From the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire, let freedom ring. From the mighty mountains of New York, let freedom ring. From the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania, let freedom ring. From the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado, let freedom ring. From the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring, and when it happens, when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Rousing stuff. Okay, our reflection activity for today. I want you to do a CSI, which is colour, symbol, image. The topic is civil rights. So I want you to come up with a colour, a symbol, and an image, all to do with civil rights. That's how you do a CSI. Yeah, pick a colour for civil rights, a symbol for civil rights, and sketch an image for civil rights. It's time for the homeworks. I have 3 questions for you. Now remember to include the question in your answer. What's the difference between overt and covert racism? So your answer is going to be like, the difference between overt and covert racism is blah blah blah. You might need to look up the meanings of those words. What type of racism existed in Australia, not Australian, in the 1950s? Was it overt or covert? That's my question. And is it right to turn a sporting event like the Springboks tour into a political event? that's time for you to make your judgment call. I look forward to reading it. Back up your answer. Don't just give your opinion. Give some evidence for why your opinion is correct. Bonus homework. Read chapter 4.5. Watch the Black Power speech. This is the guy who launched the Black Power movement. There's a speech about it there. Yeah. Stay cool and keep it real.